Hello, everyone. A very warm good evening. My name is Harshmeet Singh. I hope all of you are doing good. I welcome you all to this orientation session, a session where we will be discussing the crux of the UPSC examination. And I am a faculty for international relations. So, in this session, our objective will be simple to make sure that each and every doubt that you have here for the UPSC examination is clarified, especially with regards to IR, that is international relations, and any other question that you might have. We'll try to make it as interactive as possible. So, what we'll try and do is I will be open to as many questions as you have from any different types of subjects in the preparation, and I'll try my very best to ensure that all these questions have been answered. Now, as I said, I am a faculty for international relations, that is IR. International relations is a part of GS2 syllabus. Now, I really hope that by now all of you are very well aware of the pattern of this examination. So you know that there's a prelims examination and then we have the mains examination. Only those who clear the prelims examination get to the mains exam. In the mains examination, you have long form answer writing based on which you go through the interview stage. Now, before I go ahead, I thought I will bust some myths for this examination. So, a lot of students have many myths, that is, misinformation about this exam. And as your faculty, it is our responsibility to make sure that these myths are busted. So, the first myth that a lot of people have, I'm sure, including you also would have, is it is one of the toughest examinations in the entire country, and rather one of the toughest examinations in the world. And why do people say that? People say that because if you look at the number of people who fill in the form, on an average, every single year, about 10 lakh people fill up the form for the UPSC examination. And in the end, we have about, let's say, people clearing examination at about 900 to about 1 lakh, 900 to about 1000. Now, as I was telling, the first misconception that people have about this examination is that it is an extremely tough exam. And the reason why people say this is because over 10 lakh people fill up the form every year. And out of those, the total selections are 1000 at max, and in some years, even below 1000. That means the selection rate is actually very little. If you see the selection rate, it's close to 0.1% in most years. Now, this is a big misconception, and I'll tell you why. Why is this not true? The reason is you do not have a competition against 10 lakh people. Please understand this. This misconception, the big myth that has been created, 10 lakh people fill up the form. I'll tell you some of the problems with it. First big problem. Yes, 8 to 10 lakh people do fill up the form every year. But the fact is that the day that you go to the examination hall in the prelims examination, and you will see half of the seats will be empty. Half of the seat in front of you will be empty, the seat behind you will be empty, the seat on the side will be empty, meaning that half of the people do not even turn up for the examination. Out of the 10 lakh people who actually fill up the form, usually 4 to 5 lakh are the people who actually go and come on the day of the examination. A lot of the people just drop out. Why? A lot of the people think that I'm not well prepared, I don't want to waste my attempt, so they do not really join. First. Second, even if, let's say, there are 5 lakh people who appear for the examination, the reality is out of those 5 lakh people, not everyone is serious about the examination. Handful of them, only a few of them would have actually prepared for the entire year as you are doing right now. So just by giving one entire year to the preparation with the experts, you have already beaten huge competition, trust me, because half of the people will not sit for the exam. Out of the remaining half of them are not taking the examination seriously. They are just giving the exam for the sake of it, just trying to see if I understand what the examination is. Many people, many people give the examination just because they want to feel how it feels or how the examination is. Very few handful of people are actually preparing throughout the year to give the examination, and your competition is only from that particular branch of people. So please remove this presumption from your mind that you are competing against 10 lakh people, which is not really the case. You are competing against not even half of them, because not even half of them have actually fully prepared for this examination. Second big myth that we have. The other big myth that we have is we have to read tens of newspapers and tens of books. That again is a very, very, very big myth. Rather than reading books, multiple books for same subject, every single teacher will tell you reading one book multiple times will always give you much, much, much better result. Meaning that make sure that even if you read one book 5 times, that will be much, much, much better than reading any 5 books randomly on one single subject. I'll give you an example. In Indian polity, the one book that people usually refer to is M. Lakshmikant. Even after you read M. Lakshmikant 5 times or 6 times, the next time you read it, you can still find some information that you did not know earlier. Reading that specific book multiple times will always give you much better result as compared to reading multiple books single time. Please, please, please avoid doing that mistake. It's a very common misconception. Many students want to buy a lot of books. You enter into an aspirant's room and you will see hundreds of books lying on the bookshelf. You have maps all around your room, you have hundreds of books lying all around. But very, very, very often you will see people don't even open up those books. Those are just kept in the shelf. This is something that you need to avoid. Make sure that the multiplicity of books is not your way forward. Make sure that one book being read multiple times will always give you a much, much, much better result. Next misconception, that is that once you clear the prelims examination, mains will be easier. Many people think that prelims is the toughest exam because a lot of luck factor works there. And they think if I clear the prelims examination, mains examination will not be problematic. This is not true. The mains examination is extremely, extremely hard because you have to write long answers, something that many people are not used to. So do not take that lightly. Make sure that your preparation also involves a lot of answer writing as well. And it is important because with answer writing, you need someone to give you a lot of feedback. Unless you get feedback from the people, unless you know the experts are telling you what are you doing right, what are you doing wrong, it will be very, very problematic for you to improve. So in answer writing, my suggestion always is write as many answers as possible. Don't be fearful. A lot of people have this problem in their mind that they are very scared of writing answers. And I know why you are scared. Students believe that their answers will be bad, which is right. See, whenever you do something for the first time, it will always be bad. Driving a car for the first time, cooking food for the first time, try everything for the first time. You remember when you tried to ride a bicycle for the first time, you fell down. First of every single thing will be bad, and the first answer also will be bad. Don't worry about that. Even the toppers today, when they used to write their first answers, did a very, very bad job. What you have to do is to make sure that your first few answers are not in the UPSC exam. You have to make sure that even before the UPSC examination starts, you have practiced a lot of these questions. You have made sure that as many questions as possible are being practiced. One more important concept that you have to remember, a myth that many people have in their mind is that if you do not have a good handwriting, you will not get a chance. That is not true. See, UPSC is not judging your handwriting. Yes, your handwriting should not be as bad to make it impossible for anyone to read. As long as your writing is not impossible to read, you are fine. Don't worry about that. You are not in a situation right now where you can actually improve handwriting. Handwriting is something that is improved as a school kid. You're not a school kid anymore. You do not have a lot of time to work on the handwriting anymore. So do not focus on that. Focus on what your answer writing skills need. Focus on practicing the questions. For the prelims examination, especially if I go stage by stage, for the prelims examination, make sure that you practice as many questions as possible. The general rule is before the prelims examination starts, you should be able to solve at least 50 to 60 full length papers. When I say 50 full length papers, what I mean to say is you would be able to solve or you would have solved 5,000 questions because every paper would have 100 questions. When you have practiced 5,000 questions, what it means is by the time you enter the examination hall on the day of the prelims examination, you would be in very, very good hands. Because remember, at the end of the day, your selection will not be decided by how many books did you read. It will be decided by how many answers were you able to give. How many questions were you able to solve? So it is important to practice answering questions. Don't just focus on remembering stuff. Do not just focus on remembering random books. Focus on how can you implement that knowledge? How can you answer these questions? And answering question in itself is a skill. It is not something that is easy to grasp. You can only practice answering questions as and when you attempt as many questions as possible. So make sure that you answer, you try and attempt as many questions as possible. Try and attempt 50 or more than 50 full length tests before you sit for the prelims examination so that you are on path to ensure that you are scoring good marks in the prelims examination. One more thing, this is for the prelims. Now, in the main stage, there are certain things that are being observed in the last few years. In the last few years, if you look at the question papers, the answer sheets, the mark sheets of toppers, you will realize one very interesting pattern here. The interesting pattern is that in the mains examination, the highest scoring subjects are essay, ethics, and optional. This is also called as a E2O2 strategy. E2 means essay and ethics. O2 means two optional papers. So, whichever optional subject you have, each optional, as you know, has two papers. The subject is divided into two parts, be it Enthro, be it PSIR, PubAd, whichever optional you have. It is all divided into two papers. So, the fact here is that if you look at the toppers' mark sheets, from where are they getting most of the marks? Even in GS 1, 2, and 3, doesn't matter how hard you work, doesn't matter how great your paper was. In GS 1, GS 2, and GS 3, the best score that you will get will not go beyond 110 out of 250 marks. 210 also can be very difficult to achieve. On the other hand, if you look at the paper such as essay paper, out of 250 marks, there are students who touch 130, 140 marks in essay, and it is not impossible to touch 140 in essay. That is where there is something that people need to think about. Why? Because students ignore the essay paper, which is a huge blunder that students commit. Please, please, please do not ignore the essay paper. Essay has a high scoring potential. It requires you to practice a lot. So please make sure that the essay is practiced. And these days, the essay topics are not that easy. Essay topics are difficult to understand. If you look at, for example, the past few years and look at the essay questions or essay topics, most of them has been philosophical in nature. And when the essay papers, essay topics are philosophical in nature, it is actually difficult to decipher those. It's actually difficult to explain those. It needs a lot of practice. So make sure that you are giving enough time to the essay paper. In optionals, on the other hand, optional is a very unique paper. Why? Optional is the only paper that is of 500 marks. Please imagine. None of the other papers are of such high weightage. With optional, whatever optional you have, it carries 500 marks. Imagine this: your history, geography, Indian society, all that combined will become 250 marks. Your polity, governance, international relations, social justice, all these together will make up 250 marks. Economics, disaster management, science and tech, all these together will make up 250 marks. And on the other hand, optional alone will make up 500 marks. The two optional papers are extremely, extremely important. It is so important that I cannot even underline this enough. Make sure that with respect to the optional paper, you are practicing a lot. The ideal scenario, the ideal situation is that let's say you are starting a preparation right now, okay? Next year, the prelims is in May. So what usually happens, how the students usually approach is they try to make sure that they prepare their optional much before the prelims examination. So what the students should do ideally is they will make sure that their optional is prepared by the end of December or by the end of January maximum, so that their optional is prepared at least once, their notes making is done, they have understood everything, so that once the prelims examination is over, they only have to revise the optional once. Because if your plan is that I will only study the optional after the prelims examination is over, that will be too late. Between the prelims result and the mains exam, you do not get such a long time to prepare the optional. Between the prelims and the mains examination, you will only get time which is enough to revise the optional ones. But you will not be able to make sure that you read the optional entirely. So the suggestion is usually you have to make sure that the entire optional is prepared in advance by December, by January maximum, and not more than that. You should not delay it even further. After that, when the prelims exam is over, the time that you get between the prelims examination and the mains examination, this is when you can revise the optional once more to make sure that all that is prepared. But again, do whatever you have to, but please, please, please do not ignore the optional. As I said, optional is by far the most scoring subject, and you will see toppers getting over 300 marks in the optional paper. Scoring 300 plus is not impossible in optional out of 500. And if you can make sure that 300 is what you get in optional, 135 plus is what you get in essay, and similar marks if you get in ethics. There is no power that can stop you from getting an excellent rank. Please remember, you will get an excellent rank if you make sure that you are touching 300 in optional, 130, 135 in essay, and similar marks in the ethics paper. Because these are extremely heavily scoring subjects. These are things that you cannot ignore. One other thing I wanted to talk about before I go ahead is something called the CSAT paper. Now, one common mistake that many people commit is if you are from an engineering background, people from engineering background take so much pride in this fact that I am an engineer, I don't have to study CSAT. Now, I am not saying that you have to or don't have to study CSAT, that is entirely upon you. But what I can tell you is, I have seen multiple cases of engineers by education struggling in the CSAT paper. And it is not their fault. The point is that the CSAT paper, the level of CSAT paper, has been made much, much, much tougher in the last few years. The CSAT paper that we have now is not the same as we used to have a few years earlier. The CSAT paper also requires you to spend a lot of time with your maths practice, comprehension, logical reasoning. All of that is extremely, extremely tricky. All of that requires you to ensure that you do a lot of practice. I have seen multiple extremely, extremely heartbreaking cases where students were able to clear the cutoff in the prelims exam in the GS paper. But because they were not able to clear the cutoff in CSAT, they could not qualify. See, on paper, CSAT looks very easy because you only have to score one third marks. But in reality, that is not true. In reality, if you look at the CSAT paper, the CSAT paper is extremely, extremely, extremely difficult. Again, even if you are from an engineering background, you might find it very tough. So, my suggestion is please do not ignore the CSAT paper, because if you do not qualify the CSAT, there will be no use of all the hard work that you're putting in. Make sure that your CSAT paper is practiced very often. If you don't want to start practicing CSAT right now, that is fine. But by the time that you start with December, January, at least 4 5 months before the prelims exam, you must ensure that CSAT is practiced. Try and see which section of CSAT is the one that is your weakness. Do you have maths as a weakness? Is reading comprehension your weakness? Is your weakness something else? Whatever your weakness may be, try and practice that, because again, one third marks in CSAT paper is not as easy as it looks. There are so many examples of heartbreaking stories where students cleared the GS cutoff with 10, 15 plus marks in the cutoff, but they were just not able to clear the CSAT paper. Please do not do that mistake, even if you are from engineering background. See, those who are not from engineering background, they know their weakness. They will obviously work over it. I but the problem is with those who are from the engineering background. They assume that you are very good in maths and everything logical you'll be able to solve. I am not saying that you are wrong. I am just saying to play it safe. I am just saying that there is need to look into the paper, look at the level of the paper, and practice that as well. So just to recap, essay ethics optional for the mains examination, extremely important, especially the essay paper because most students ignore the essay paper. There are hardly any students who have written even 5 essays before the mains exam. You have to make sure that you write at least 10 to 15 essays before the mains exam is here so that you know the structure of the essay. On the other hand, for the prelims examination, number one, the first thing I said was prelims test series, extremely important. Make sure that you practice at least 50 full length tests. Second thing I said was the CSAT paper. The CSAT paper extremely important because it is ignored by many people. Thirdly, as I said, do not duplicate your effort by buying a lot of books. Buying a lot of books does not help anyone. Read from one book multiple times. That will always give you much better result as compared to others. Now, one more thing I would like to advise here before I move on to my specific subject, international relations, and talk about its preparation strategy. But before that, one more thing. One other very common mistake that many people commit is over analyzing the previous year papers. When you look at the previous year papers, please understand every single year, UPSC will always ask a few questions that are extremely tough. That is how the paper is set. The UPSC examiners always set the paper in such a manner that it is almost impossible for you to answer all the questions. There will always be some question that you just cannot answer. So when you look at a previous year paper and you think there is a very difficult question, you're not able to answer that, do not lose hope. Do not start searching random books, random notes now just to answer a very difficult question. Why? The reason is the UPSC does not expect you to answer all the questions anyway. Why am I saying this? Prelims has 100 questions in the GS paper. What is the cutoff? Every single year the cutoff changes, but usually, if you look at the cutoff from the general category, if it is a tough paper, like the last year, the cutoff goes from 85 to 88 for general category. If it's an easier paper, the cutoff may be 95 to 100. Meaning that even in the form of the toughest paper, even if you have a very easy paper, even then, even if you can answer only 55 to 60 questions correctly and leave all other questions, even then you will get selected. What I mean to say is, UPSC does not expect you to answer all the questions correctly. There will always be some questions in the paper that you do not know the answers of, which is absolutely fine. In the prelims exam, you are not supposed to know the answers to each and every question. Please understand. Do not run behind random knowledge, random notes just because the notes were able to help you answer one very tough question. Please do not do that. I have seen so many people saying that I will read geography once more from a new book. Why? Because 3 years ago there was a question that came from that particular book. It doesn't make sense. UPSC will always make a question that will not be easily answerable from normal books. But that does not mean that now you start running after new books altogether. That now you start looking after which book do you have to follow, which source do you have to follow. Please do not do that. The reason is that there is no end to it. There is no end to that particular conundrum. You cannot just keep on going ahead and searching for new books. That is not how it should work. Please make sure that you restrict your sources. Even if there's a very tough question in the last few years, don't worry, you can just leave it. As long as you can answer 65 to 70 questions correctly, there is nothing else that you have to do. You can always leave 25 to 30 questions in the paper. Always. Don't worry. If you have been able to answer all the other questions correctly, your selection will be guaranteed. Now, this was about the general preparation. What are the common mistakes that people commit? What are the common myths that people have? If you have any other questions, you can ask them in the chat as well. Now, I wanted to put the focus on the subject that I teach. Here at Vishnu IAS Academy, I teach international relations, that is IR. International relations is by far one of the most interesting subjects. When I say interesting, I'm not saying interesting because I teach it. I'm saying interesting because it is one of those subjects about which you keep on reading in the newspapers, about which you keep on hearing stories all around you. Unlike other subjects such as, let's say, history, you will not hear about these things. You just have to remember a lot of stuff. But with IR, it is so dynamic in nature. It keeps on changing that it actually is dependent a lot on current affairs. The things that you see around you, what is covered in the newspaper, all that is important for IR. So I want to focus now on the best preparation strategy for IR, that is international relations. What is it that you have to keep in mind? Certain things that you must understand, certain things that you can ignore. So for IR, as I said first, it is an extremely dynamic subject. And when I say dynamic, what we mean to say is rather than depending upon any specific book, it is always advisable to focus much more on the current affairs, to focus much more on the newspapers. For example, if you ask which IR book is good enough, there's a book written by Rajiv Sikri. But the problem is that book also is very static. I'll give you an example. What happened between India and Pakistan in the last few days, in the last few weeks? Every one of you saw this in the news. The terror attack at Pahalgam, India's response, Operation Sindoor, all these things we saw. Now, no IR book will cover this. The reason being that the books are not published every day, right? The books are published, or whatever books that you are reading right now would be published some months back or some years back or whatever. That means there is no book that can give you exactly up to date information with respect to what is happening in IR. And that is why no one specific book, no one single book is good enough for IR. And that is why my suggestion here always is that for IR specifically, you have to make sure that your focus is more on the current affairs part. Your focus is not on the part where what is covered in some of the IR books. Focus more on the current affairs part of it, because this is where most of the questions come in. I'll give you a real example. Okay. Operation Sindoor happened. The government of India took some action against Pakistan. For our examination point of view, it is not important to remember how many people were killed, what strikes happened, what happened between India and Pakistan. What is important for us is what changes did the government announce in the Indus Water Treaty. I'm sure all of you would have seen this in the news, that the first thing that the government of India did after the Pahalgam terror attack was that we announced that the Indus Water Treaty is into abeyance now. Abeyance means the government says that now we have the right not to accept this treaty, and we can go against this as well. That is an important topic. So from IR, this becomes important. That is, the Indus Water Treaty becomes important. Rather than focusing on how many missiles were shot from our side, how many people died, was there some crashing of the plane or not, that is not relevant. What is relevant is the treaty. This is where IR is such a dynamic subject, because it is about what is happening around us. I'll give you one more real example of the question that was asked. So, around 2017, India and China had a dispute. This was called as a Doklam dispute. Now, what was a Doklam dispute? Doklam is a small place in Bhutan. If you look at the map, you will see Bhutan is between India and China. Bhutan is a country with which India has a very special relationship. How? Bhutan is a country to which India has promised that if you require any help in defense, especially India will come to help you. So India has a treaty of friendship with Bhutan under which we have promised them that we'll come to help you out in case you need certain help, in case you need certain defense. So what happened was Bhutan's area, that is Doklam, in that area the Chinese came in 2017. And China said, this is our territory, we will not go away. So India sent its armed forces to Bhutan. Why did we send the armed forces? Because again, India has a treaty with Bhutan under which we said that I will come or we will come to help you out. Now, many people knew that this is such an important topic. Students throughout the year researched about Doklam. Throughout the year, students focus on what Doklam is, where Doklam is, what is the river that goes through Doklam. All of these things students studied in great detail. However, the question that was asked in the GS2 paper in the mains exam was that in the recent Doklam dispute, we have seen India going to defend Bhutan because of our treaty. The question was, is it time for India to renegotiate the treaty? Because we are not gaining anything out of the treaty. India is not getting any help. On the other hand, we are just providing help to Bhutan. So is it time for us to renegotiate the treaty? That was a question that was asked. Again, it is such a specific question based on the things that are in the news. So, like the Doklam issue was in the news, that is why this particular question was asked. And that is how IR questions are extremely dynamic in nature, mainly focused on the things that are in the news, mainly focused on topics that are in the news, mainly focused on places that are in the news. For example, in the prelims examination, every single year, you can expect one or two questions based on maps. Now, what I mean by maps is places that are in the news throughout the world. So, places are in the news because maybe there is a conflict like Ukraine Russia war. Afghanistan is always in the news ever since America went out of Afghanistan once again. Middle East is always in the news. There are conflicts in different parts like in Israel, etc. There is a very common question where the UPSC will ask, let's say Israel is in the news. So they will ask which of the following countries share a border with Israel. Or let's say there's a water body in the region that is in the news. They'll ask what exactly are the countries that share a boundary with the Black Sea, for example. So those kind of questions are extremely common. These are map-based questions. So I'm sure all of you have seen the world map, India map. Many of you would have also pasted that map in your room wherever you stay. Do look at that map continuously time and time again. Don't just put it on the wall and forget about it. That is a common mistake people commit. All of us buy the map, we put it on the wall, and then we forget about that. Look at that map, look at the places that are in the news, look at the nearby countries that are in the news, look at which country shares the border with which water body. And that is how these kind of questions from IR in the prelims examination can be easily answered. Okay, I have a question from a student. Let me address that. Venkat is saying, I have been preparing for Telangana PCS for past 1.5 years. I have at least some knowledge of the GS topic, but I did not study IR as it carries very less score in the state PCS. Please suggest ways to master IR. Yes, Vishnu. Yes, Venkat, that's what we are discussing. So, as I said, I'll tell you the very basics of IR. IR is a subject from where you do not need to buy a book. Even if you don't buy a book for IR, that is absolutely fine because the books will only give you background knowledge. Let's say if you buy the Rajiv Sikri book of IR, it will only give you background knowledge of India-Pakistan relations, background knowledge of India-China relations. The questions that are asked are not about the old background relations. The questions that are asked are about what is happening in the last few years. So the best way to read IR is to read from the current affair magazines. So, for example, at Vishnu IAS, we have the monthly current affair magazine, which has subject wise division. So, just look at from the IR point of view, whatever news has been covered. That will be good enough because almost all the questions in IR are always about the topics that are in the news. If you think that you want certain background knowledge about India's relationship with neighbors, for example, or India's relationship with other countries, if you want that background knowledge, feel free to buy the book. The book is by Rajiv Sikri. I'll give you the name in the chat as well. So you can buy Rajiv Sikri's book for he's a retired IFS officer. You can buy that book for IR. But again, it is a book that will only give you a background knowledge of relations. It was published a few years ago. But the question mostly will be about the current topics that are in the news about IR. So IR is something that can be mastered very easily with the help of current affair magazines because current affair magazines have divided subject wise divided information. So focus on the IR part, focus on the current affairs part from the newspapers. If you want certain articles to read in the Indian Express, articles written by C. Rajamohan are very important. He writes for IR. So if you want, I can write that name also in the chat. C. Rajamohan. He is very famous for writing articles in the Indian Express. So he writes articles in the Indian Express on India's diplomacy, India's relationship with the neighboring countries, etc. Focus on that. Focus on the information given by Ministry of External Affairs, the codes given by them. Focus on the places that are in the news. For example, Ukraine is in the news, so study the map of Ukraine very carefully. What are the water bodies near Ukraine? Ukraine shares a border with which country? Then countries such as Turkey, for example, is in the news. So water bodies near Turkey, the water bodies near Turkey share a border with which country, so on and so forth. India's neighborhood, for example, with which country do we share a good relation, bad relation, like India, Bangladesh, India, Pakistan, bilateral relations. One other thing, if let's say you don't want to buy a book, I'll give you a very, very simple method to have a background knowledge about everything. So if you look at the IR syllabus, you have to read about India's relationship with all our neighboring countries, right? Let's say India, Pakistan. Let's assume you do not know the history of India Pakistan relations or India Bangladesh relations. Let's assume you do not know the history of India Bangladesh relations. How can you start? Or how do you understand the background knowledge of it? It's very easy. Every relation of India with every country has a Wikipedia page. So if you go to Google and write India Bangladesh relationship Wikipedia, the Wikipedia page will give you the entire very long article about India Bangladesh relationship. You can read that to get a background knowledge. But again, you don't have to spend that much time. When we have IR classes in your course at the Vishnu IS Academy, I'll be taking these classes and we'll discuss all the background knowledge in short, clear terms about what is important, what is not important. So you don't have to worry about that. Okay, I hope that answers this question about how to master IR. Again, I'll repeat no specific book is required. Focus mostly on the current affair magazines, the monthly current affair magazines that we also have. Also, because the current affair magazines are divided subject wise, just pick up the IR part from the current affair magazine. That would be good enough. Okay, Raj has another question. Raj says for PSIR, which source we need to follow? So, Raj, not just for PSIR, but any optional subject that you take will always require multiple sources. So for PSIR also there are multiple books that you require. For example, there are books by OP Goba. So OP Goba, very well-known professor, he has written multiple books. So one book, for example, is on Indian political thinkers, another book is on Western political thinkers. So there are two ways to do this. One way is that you buy multiple books. There are six, seven books that you need to buy for PSIR specifically. And you don't need to read any of those books completely. Just take the index and see what is it common in PSIR syllabus of UPSC, study those topics. There is an easier way also. The easier way is the IGNOU University notes. So IGNOU University offers BA Political Science and MA Political Science programs. The notes of BA Political Science and MA Political Science of IGNOU are free to download online. So you can just go online, search BA Political Science course material IGNOU. Similarly, MA Political Science course material IGNOU. Just download all the PDFs. Okay. Now what you have to do is open the UPSC PSIR syllabus in front of you and match what are the topics that you have to read and pick out those topics from the IGNOU course books and you can cover the entire syllabus like that. So for that, you would not even have to buy any other book. Apart from IR current affairs, you will have to get updated. I'll give you an example. So, for example, in IGNOU BA Political Science, they will teach you 20 political thinkers. UPSC does not need you to study 20 political thinkers. Let's say UPSC only needs you to study, let's say UPSC only needs you to study, let's say seven political thinkers or eight political thinkers. So what happens in that case? Take a list of that seven, eight political thinkers from UPSC syllabus, just take out their content from the IGNOU course book, and you can just read that. So IGNOU course book will have much wider content than what is required for UPSC. So what you can do is, again, this is a shortcut. You don't need to buy multiple books. If you can just depend on the IGNOU course books, that will be good enough. If not, if you're not happy with the quality of IGNOU notebooks, then as I said, there are multiple books. OP Goba has multiple books written. Andrew Hayward has a book on global politics. So these are the course books that you can buy. Topic wise, there is no one single book or there is no one single good book that I can tell you that covers the entire PSIR syllabus. And that is true for every optional subject. No optional subject can be covered in one single book. There are always multiple books to be read. One more clarification here. For those who think of PSIR, Raj says is IGNOU enough. Raj, for the static part, IGNOU will do the job. For the IR parts, in paper 2, part B, when you read about international relations, that is where you have to study current affairs as well. So IGNOU books for the static part can be good enough. Again, make sure that you study all the topics individually from the IGNOU sources. That will get you most of the coverage. For the IR part that is dynamic in nature, that particular part, that basically has to be updated from current affairs. For example, I'll give you an example like India Africa relations. So, India Africa relations are very important. Africa is one continent where India has been spending a lot of time, energy, money. Like other countries like China, US, they have also been spending a lot of money in Africa. India is also doing that. So, when you have to study about India Africa relations, you can't study from IGNOU because those are old books written. So, they will not be updated. So, for India Africa relations, you have to focus on the current affairs material. You have to focus on the other sources that can give you information. So, while the IGNOU sources or IGNOU books can give you a good enough base for the static part, that will be good enough. For the current affairs part, that is where you'll have to focus more. For the IR part, you'll have to basically make sure that for the IR part you take current affairs help and newspapers, etc. One other very big misconception that people have about PSIR, I would just like to clarify that many people have this common mistake in their mind. They assume that PSIR means polity plus international relations. So you combine that, that becomes PSIR, which is not true. If you look at the syllabus of PSIR, only 20 to 25% of that is Indian polity that you read in GS. Similarly, 20% of that will be IR that you read in GS. That over half of the syllabus of PSIR is not about polity or international relations. Over half of the syllabus of PSIR is actually about theories, thinkers, Western political thinkers, Indian political thinkers, so on and so forth. So all of that basically gets, all of that has to be a part of PSIR. Venkat, if you want to know any other information about the course, don't worry, one or someone from the team will get in touch with you. Okay, Venkat, someone from the team will get in touch with you about the course fee, any other information that you require. Don't worry about that. All right. If you have any other questions that you have in your mind regarding PSIR, IR, or just a general preparation, I'll be happy to answer those. Please let me know if you have any question in your mind. Okay. Now, some other thoughts or some other words of advice that I would wanted to share with you that I do with every student. One very common mistake that people do is in the beginning of your preparation itself, people start dreaming a lot of big things. Like there are students that I know that are very fond of looking at the interview videos. You know, on social media, there are so many videos available these days of mock interviews conducted for the UPSC aspirants, and people are very fond of seeing that. I am not saying there is anything wrong with that. Watch those videos for inspiration, etc. But when you are just starting your preparation, when you are just at the initial stage, you have just started your preparation, now is not the time to focus on interview preparation or everything else. Right now, your initial few months should be spent exclusively on preparing for the prelims and the mains examination. If you qualify the mains examination and you have to appear for the interview, trust me, you will have enough time, enough resources, you will have enough help. There will be so many people happy to help you to prepare for the interview. But at the beginning of your preparation stage, do not waste your time by looking at these videos of how to appear for interview and start dreaming that, oh, I will also look at this, I'll also say this in video or interview, etc. That is a thing of later. Don't do this right now. Okay, I have a question from Madhu. Madhu is saying, suggest a plan to choose my optional because I'm in a dilemma between sociology and PSIR. Okay. So, Madhu, I can't answer which is better. I teach PSIR, so it's better for me. But I can tell you what are the things to keep in mind before choosing your optional so that you can make the decision on your own. And I'll just tell you why and how do the people take decisions. So, there are two or three factors that people keep in mind and that everyone should keep in mind while choosing their optional paper. First, is there a subject that you studied in your college? Is there a subject, let's say sociology, PSI, or is any one of these a subject that you studied in bachelor's or master's? If you did, and you were good in college or you were paying attention in college, then it makes a lot of sense to go ahead with that subject only as your optional. The reason being, it will save a lot of time because a lot of things will be common. So if you have already studied, let's say, anthro or socio or whatever economics or PSIR in your graduation or masters, it makes a lot of sense to go ahead with that. That is first option that people look. Second, let's assume you have not studied that in college. You have not studied any of the optional subjects in college, then what do you do? Second option that you have, or second thing that you need to keep in mind with is try and choose an optional that has a lot of common syllabus with the GS papers. With the GS papers, as in, for example, PSIR has a lot of things common with polity, a lot of things common with IR. Geography has a lot of things common with geography, GS. History, economics. So, because what happens is, whatever you are studying already in GS, you will be covering that in optional, so it saves a lot of time. That is the second thing you keep in mind. Third thing to keep in mind is, do you prefer a subject that is static, where you don't want to go ahead with current affairs? Because there are some people who think that I am fine in remembering stuff. I don't want to increase my syllabus. I don't want my subject to be dynamic in nature. If you don't want a subject that is dynamic, that keeps on changing, then don't go with PSIR or economics, etc. Then go with subject that are static in nature. Socio, anthro, history, those are static in nature. And the last one is the syllabus. Sociology is considered to have slightly lower syllabus as compared to others. But on the other hand, with PSIR, the syllabus looks long, but it looks long because it's a lot of repeat of syllabus. Like Marxism, you study at three, four different places, the same thing. Ideology, read at two, three different places. So again, that is what you have to keep in mind. And at the end, look at what are the availability of sources. Options that are commonly taken by many people, they have a lot of resources available, books, notes, etc., are available in the market, so it is easier to prepare. For example, if you have studied English literature in college and you think I will take English literature as the optional subject, it will be difficult for you because you will not even find good books for English literature option in the market. So it's very difficult. So take an optional where the material is easily available, and in the end, obviously, the interest that you have, because the optional is one subject which you have to study in a lot of detail. So unless you like that subject, don't take it, because there is no running away from the subject once you have taken it. Once you have taken that subject, you will have to study in lot of detail to get good marks. So make sure before taking it, without listening to other people's advice randomly, look at what your interest is. Are you interested enough? For that, look at the syllabus. The syllabus of optional papers are available on the website of UPSC. In the UPSC notification, they give syllabus of every subject. If you want, you can look at some previous year questions also that UPSC has asked. Just read those questions. Spend some time. Spend 2 3 days reading those questions that have been asked. See which are the questions that look easier for you to attempt. I'm sure you will not be able to attend the question right now without preparation, but at least read the few questions and see if you're able to attempt, do they look familiar or not. That will be my session, Madhu. So based on that, you decide whichever do you want. But again, these are the things that people usually keep in mind while choosing their optional. What else? Any other questions, guys? Anything else that you have in your mind? If not, then these are the things that I wanted to share with you in this session. I really hope to see you all in my classes later on at Vishnu Academy, where I teach international relations. Make sure that whatever you decide, you should start your preparation as quickly as possible. The next year's prelims examination is less than 1 year away. And trust me, when you start your preparation, this subject or this thing doesn't really, the 1 year doesn't really look a very long time. 1 year will pass on very quickly, so do not delay it. Raj is saying, please suggest some tips on how to opt for hobby. Raj, as I said, your preparation for the interview stage should happen much later on. Don't focus on that right now. Focus on preparing your syllabus for prelims and mains once you go through that, once you actually read the interview stage. Focus on the hobbies and interview part of it then, because right now you don't have to spend any time on hobby. Hobby is not something for which you should spend some extra time. That is not the definition of hobby, right? The definition of hobby is that something that comes naturally to you itself. So you don't have to worry about that right now. Focus just on completing the syllabus of prelims and mains exam. Only when you read the interview stage, then these things become relevant, and it is then that we'll discuss. Okay. So this brings me to the conclusion of this session. I really hope that you learned something, some new things today. That most of your questions were answered. Raj, no notes, etc., are enough. You can read notes by to have a background knowledge of it, but you have to keep updating it with current affairs. So focus on that. Focus on, because anyone else writing their notes is not the best way forward, because you don't know how have they written, what is the knowledge, what was discussed in the class. It's always better to make your own notes to start from the scratch. How to start note making? Raj, note making is depends on an individual. Some people want to write notes in a lot of detail, depending upon how they want to prepare or how they want to revise. Some people want to write notes in a very short form. So it depends entirely upon you. Again, the entire idea of making notes is to make sure that you are able to revise using them. I can make the same notes in 10 long pages. You may make the same notes in just 2 pages. So notes have to be for you. It is not for a teacher to check from your copy. Whatever notes are helpful for you, if you think concise notes, starting in short form, helps you revise better, helps you remember everything, go ahead with that. If you think that no, I want to write in much broader form, much more detailed form, go ahead with that. That is entirely up to you. So it's a very personal choice. Okay. I hope this answers it, and I hope you are now all set to prepare your journey, to start your journey into the UPSC preparation. All the very best, guys. You're taking a great decision. Just stick with it. Make sure that the next 1 year is the best chance that you give yourself to achieve your dream. Catch us in the next sessions for the orientation series. I'll see you in the class very soon. Bye bye, guys. Take care of yourself.